Hey, hi everybody. Um, yeah, welcome to Mahamudra for the People. It's great to see everybody. Um, and I imagine people will kind of continue to trickle in. I wanted to see if maybe we could start the session with some question and answers. I had an emergency come up last week, so I wasn't able to be here. And I'd like to see if anybody has any questions. And if you do, you can go to the Ask a Question tab at the bottom of the page and ask your question. And as maybe we'll wait for that to trickle in, if they do trickle in, take a little bit of time to just come into the space. Allow your body to relax. And see if you can generate just mind of Mahamudra without much needing to kind of get everything into place, right? You want to see if we can allow the mind to be relaxed, rest into a sense of spaciousness. Into a ability to hold whatever's arising in the moment. And take this moment to just reflect on anything that you might have any questions about, either from your own practice or what we've done up until now. If anything's come up, for the group. And if nothing's coming up, then I'll move on. Okay. All right. So I was actually thinking, I know that, we'd been in the midst of looking at the view, the path, and the fruit, from Lama Shan. And we had done a little bit of work on the path. And the path really basically is the practice of Mahamudra, which is both easy and it takes a little getting used to, I think you could say. And I think for this session, I'd like to kind of step away temporarily from Lama Shan and step towards the third Karmapa, Rangjung Dorje, who wrote a song. So it's called, sometimes it's called the Mahamudra prayer or the Mahamudra aspiration prayer. In the translation, again, in the same book, Mind of Mahamudra, on page 147, it's the prayer for the definitive meaning, the Mahamudra. So it's a little bit longer than the other versions of the name. So anyway, and this translation is a little different actually than the one I'm used to, but I'm going to use it. And one of the reasons why I want to include this right now is because it's very beautiful. It's approximately 25 stanzas, and maybe we'll get halfway today. But it really kind of captures the heart of the practice, so the path of Mahamudra. And so, again, like we've done in the past, allow yourself to just totally relax. And I'm going to kind of read this out slowly. And maybe I'll read the whole thing just so everybody can get the the flavor of this, and just allow yourself to hear the sound and allow the sound waves, through whatever device you're using to kind of hit your ear, and let whatever experience might arise to arise. Right? Don't think you need to be doing anything in particular or having any particular kind of experience. Just take this in, okay? And then I'll add a little bit of commentary in terms of how this relates to practice, and then of course there's time for people to ask questions and for me to answer them as best as I know how. So, Namo Guru. Gurus, deities of the Yidam mandalas, conquerors and their children in the 3 times and the 10 directions. Regard me with love and give me your blessing so that my prayer will be perfectly fulfilled. May the rivers of accumulation of virtue, unpolluted by the triple aspects that come from the snow mountains of the pure thoughts and actions of myself and endless beings, enter the ocean of the 4 kayas. Until that time that we attain that, may we, throughout every lifetime, never even hear the words bad actions or suffering, and enjoy the glorious ocean of good actions and happiness. May I obtain the supreme freedoms and wealths, have faith, diligence, and wisdom, rely on an excellent spiritual friend, obtain the quintessence of the teachings, practice them correctly without any obstacle, and thus practice the sublime Dharma throughout all of my lifetimes. Hearing the scriptures and logic brings freedom from the clouds of ignorance. So actually, right before here, so this is basically like a very flowery kind of aspiration, setting the intention for the song. And now the actual kind of, essence of Mahamudra is described here on in the way to practice. So hearing the scriptures and logic brings freedom from the clouds of ignorance. Contemplating the instructions defeats the darkness of doubt. The light of meditation illuminates the true nature just as it is. May the radiance of the 3 wisdoms increase. The 2 truths, ultimate and relative, free from the 2 extremes of eternalism and nihilism, are the meaning of the basis. The 2 accumulations, free from the extremes of embellishment and denigration, are the supreme path. The attainment of the 2 benefits, free from the extremes of existence and peace, is the attainment of the result. May we meet this Dharma that is free of error. The basis for purification is the mind, the union of clarity and emptiness. The purifier is the great Vajra Yoga of Mahamudra. And the purified are the stains of extrinsic delusion. May the result of purification in the stainless Dharmakaya become manifest. The confidence of the view cuts through the doubts about the basis. The essential point of meditation is to remain undistracted from that. The supreme conduct is training in the entire meaning of meditation. May there be confidence of view, meditation, and conduct. All phenomena are manifestations of the mind. The mind is without mind, devoid of any essence of mind, empty and unceasing, and yet appearing as anything whatsoever. May it be perfectly examined and be completely understood. The self-appearances that have never existed are mistaken as objects. Through the power of ignorance, self-knowing is mistaken for a self. Through the power of dualism, we wander in the vastness of existence. May the error of ignorance be thoroughly understood. It has no existence. Even the conquerors have not seen it. It is not non-existent. It is the basis for all samsara and nirvana. There is no contradiction. It is the path of the middle way, the union, middle way of union. May the true nature of the mind, free from extremes, be realized. It cannot be indicated by saying it is this. It cannot be refuted by saying it is not this. The true nature that transcends the intellect is non-composite. May there be certainty in the extreme of the true meaning. If this is not realized, there will be circling within samsara. If this is realized, there's nothing other than Buddhahood. There is no, this is it, this isn't it anywhere. May we know the true nature, the hidden secret of the alaya. Appearances are mind, and emptiness is mind. Thoughts are mind, and delusion is mind. Origination is mind, and cessation is mind. May we cut through all conceptual embellishments in the mind. Unadulterated by mentally fabricated, forced meditation, unshaken by the winds of ordinary preoccupations, knowing how to rest naturally in unaltered naturalness, may we master and maintain the practice of the meaning of the mind. The waves of obvious and subtle thoughts cease by themselves. The undisturbed river of the mind becomes naturally calm. May there be an untroubled, peaceful sea of shamatha, free from the polluting impurities of dullness and agitation. When we look again and again at the mind that cannot be seen, we will perfectly see that which is not seen, just as it is. May we cut through doubts as to what the meaning is or isn't, and have unmistaken knowledge of our own true nature. Looking at objects, there are no objects. They are seen to be mind. Looking at the mind, there is no mind. It is devoid of essence. Looking at both spontaneously extinguishes dualism. May we realize luminosity, which is the great nature of mind. The freedom from attention is the Mahamudra. The freedom from extremes is the Mahamadhyamaka. This is also named the all-inclusive Dzogchen. May there be the confidence that through knowing one, all will be realized. Continuous great bliss, free from attachment, unveiled luminosity, free from fixation on attributes, naturally present non-thought, transcending the intellect. May there be a continuity of these effortless experiences. Attachment to good and fixation on experiences is spontaneously liberated. Bad thoughts and illusions are naturally purified in the elements. The ordinary mind has no rejection or adoption, no elimination, and no attainment. May we realize the truth of the true nature, free from all conceptual elaborations. The nature of beings is always Buddhahood, but not realizing that, they wander in endless samsara. May I have overwhelming compassion for beings in limitless, endless suffering. When there is love with unceasing power of overwhelming compassion, the meaning of the empty essence appears nakedly. May I meditate inseparably day and night on the union, the supreme path which is free from error. Through the power of meditation, there is sight and clairvoyance. Beings are ripened, Buddha realms are purified, and the prayers for accomplishing the qualities of Buddhahood are perfected. May there be Buddhahood where perfection, ripening, and fulfillment are brought to completion. Through the compassion of the conquerors and their children in the 10 directions, and through the power of all the good karma there can be, may my pure prayers and those of all beings be perfectly fulfilled. This prayer for the definitive meaning, the Mahamudra, was composed by the Lord Karmapa Rangjung Dorje. So, let's just sip of coffee. So I love this this song, and I first came across it actually in 1995. I happened to be in Scotland and spent a summer weekend at Semi-Ling monastery the Trungpa Rinpoche co-founded. And I bought the text not knowing what it was, and after going to Scotland, I returned back to New York for a couple of weeks, and then I went to India for the first time, and I received the transmission of this a couple of times actually on that trip, and it's remained something that's been kind of central to my practice for a while. And again, while this translation is a little different than the one that I'm used to, I'd like to kind of touch on a couple of points that I find to be particularly powerful and very clear in the song. And so there's this one stanza: the basis for purification is mind, the union of clarity and emptiness. The purifier is the great Vajra Yoga of Mahamudra. The purified, or that which is purified, are the stains of extrinsic delusion. I don't know why that word is so hard for me. And so, actually, in this other translation I have, it's actually described as adventitious stains. So anyway, that which we are seeking to purify, right, is our experience of mind. And when we allow ourselves to kind of rest into the experience of shamatha, and we're able to allow for the mind to settle naturally, right? Within the context of shamatha, we're not trying to make thoughts stop. We're not trying to make anything particular happen, like we've been looking at Tilopa's 6 nails. And interestingly enough, what commonly happens is that once we begin to orient ourselves in shamatha practice, in accordance with the instructions pointed out by Tilopa in the 6 nails, that eventually things start to just settle naturally, right? And I don't know if anybody's experienced this yet, but sound out if you have, where it seems like we're able to let things happen naturally, like so thought occurrence happens, and yet there's a sense of spaciousness to it. And I think another good word for it is that there's a little bit of maturity in relationship to thought occurrence happening, right? And the maturity is based on having some experience with the process of what happens, right? So we might be sitting in meditation, thought activity arises, and again, we just kind of rest non-distractedly with the experience of whatever's happening, and we'll find that experience of thought activity will occur, and then something happens, right? And then and then we observe that, and then we observe after that, and then we observe after that, and through this process, this is what Karmapa is talking about through Karmapa, that the basis of purification is the mind, the union of clarity and emptiness. And the clarity aspect is typically described as the ability for things to happen. And the emptiness aspect is that whatever is happening is just happening, but it has no real independent self created essence, that it's just happening and going, happening, going. There's nothing super real about it. It's happening, right? But the thought activity does not the reality, quote unquote reality, of whatever is arising is kind of created by our reactivity. So if we're able to rest in the practice of shamatha, with clarity and with a sense of openness to whatever is arising, then the reactivity that arises in meditation naturally kind of dissipates, and whatever is happening is just pure appearance. It just happens and then changes, happens and changes, happens and changes. Thank you about the haircut, from Bowie. And so the purifier is this great Vajra Yoga of Mahamudra. So, what we're doing is we are letting everything that arise, like all of the quote unquote stains, our reactivity arise, and we just sit openly and let that happen. We don't chase. We don't get, super analytical, like, a psychoanalyst, and wonder, oh, why did that happen? Oh boy, my thoughts are all screwed up today. Like, I'm probably a messed up person, or, I was dropped on my head as a child. It's not like that, So all it is just natural kind of observation. And I've used this metaphor before because I really like it. Again, it's like returning to just being like a bird, and just observing like a bird might in the tree. So just noticing. Birds don't necessarily create an entire conceptual elaboration, as far as I understand, of what's happening. It's just observing things change, or they stay the same, but everything changes over time, and we rest into that experience. And as we do that, thought activity tends to settle quite a bit. There's as the mind becomes less reactive, there becomes an experience of greater spaciousness between thoughts, between whatever occurrences are happening in the moment. And so, at the end of the stanza, Karmapa says, "May there be the confidence of view, meditation, and conduct." So the view is cutting through doubts about the basis, and the basis is the experience itself, right? The way mind is, the way it arises, the way we experience it. So the basis is mind as the ground upon which everything that arises in our experience happens. And so the confidence of the view, so confidence of understanding the nature of mind. So this is like the view, path, and fruit that we're talking about. Confidence in the nature of mind being expansive, not created or not reflected by the thoughts that are arise from it. Right? That it's not that it's separate, but as a source, it's fundamentally pure. It's fundamentally, awakened and naturally liberated. Thought activity arises, which also the thoughts are inherently liberated, pure, without any kind of, classification of good or bad. And then, of course, as a third-party observer, when we experience the thoughts, attachment, aversion, and ignorance are kind of the three primary kind of roots of what we experience in relationship to our experience of mind, or experience in terms of visual phenomenon, auditory phenomenon, olfactory phenomenon, all of our sense faculties. And from there, that's where this kind of ignorance and the stains of habit are created. So the confidence of the view is through the practice of Mahamudra, coming back to examining the experience of mind. Now, not when I say examining, I don't mean like in an analytic way, but it's just familiarity. Like when we so we're all adults here. So like when we're with a partner, right, we begin to kind of understand with experience and with repeated being in relationship with people we might be close and intimate with, we kind of get to know how their body feels, right, and how they react to being touched. So in the same way, right, with that same kind of intimacy, we return back to the experience of meditation. And through repeated meditation sessions, we eventually become as intimately connected and aware as we might to our own body or the bodies of others who we're intimate with, our own, the experience of mind itself. So I don't know if that makes sense. And actually, maybe I'll pause here to see if anybody has any questions, because I can kind of keep going. Okay, perfect. There's a question. I just really kind of want to make sure that. Okay. I just want to make sure everything makes sense to people. So Eddie asks, Lama Justin, within the context of our practices as a Sangha, how closely do we follow the Karma Kagyu lineage? I'm wondering in general, not specifically. Yeah, it's a good question. I think to some extent, I don't want to say that we're a Kagyu tradition because I don't really view us as that specifically. I think Rod and I basically are trained within the primarily the Kagyu tradition. So a lot of the Tibetan Buddhist stuff will come through that lens. I have a great love for the Karma Kagyu tradition, but I don't. I mean, I'm pretty non-sectarian these days. So anyway, hopefully that's helpful. It's a work in progress, I think. The Mahamudra stuff all comes out of the Kagyu lineage that we do, with the exception of like the more Indian kind of stuff that I do for my Trepa, and that generally comes originally from that source material. But hopefully that's an okay answer. And thank you, Javi, about the partner metaphor being excellent. And Tony says, this does accord with my experience, I think, what is meant by Vajra Yoga here. Maybe this is minor, but I find it interesting and it isn't really translated. Yeah, so Vajra Yoga, so of course, doesn't mean the physical yoga, like, with asanas, but Vajra Yoga, so like, the yoga of this immutable experience. The experience resting in Mahamudra is basically resting in the Vajra-like quality of mind. It's indestructible, right? It's vast and expansive. So the yoga piece is really kind of coming back into the practice of Mahamudra. So there's like some song like I read a long time ago where Milarepa is saying, if you want to be a good yogi or yogini, you should be a yogi or yogini of space, right? And so he doesn't mean spacey. He means that we should be able to practice in a way where, for lack of a better term, series of terms, we merge our mind, our experience of awareness with space, right? And so that's the Vajra-like quality of it. So that's what he's talking about in that context. It isn't translated, and actually, it's really interesting because in this particular translation of this song, I don't think the term Vajra Yoga is used. So I think it's interesting. But then again, I think all this stuff is interesting because I'm a nerd. So confidence of the view cuts through doubts about the basis. The essential point of meditation is to remain undistracted from that. Right? So the essential point of meditation is to remain undistracted in relationship to the essence of mind. So all we're doing is resting with direct observational awareness of what's being experienced in the moment. The observational awareness, again, isn't third party, but the awareness part, and it's not like small a awareness, it's big A awareness. It's Rigpa, so it's mind with the ability to know mind. So mind knowing mind. Again, so the essential point of meditation is to remain undistracted about the basis of mind, the way mind arises. And the supreme conduct is training in the entire meaning of meditation. So the entire meaning of meditation is, formal meditation sessions. It's, going out in the world. And in that particular, context, going out into the world and being in the midst of our daily activities while remaining undistracted in relationship to the way mind arises. So like, and I'm not saying like I'm like a great yogi, but earlier this morning, we, the kids are back with us, and we went to the beach, and so, it's like a hot day, and so I, laid in the sand a bit and got hot, and then, I was trying to rest in the experience of heat, just resting undistractedly in relationship to kind of baking. Right, but then also the sounds of the beach. You could hear all sorts of things. You could hear kids, yelling and playing. You could hear the crashing of the waves. You could hear the wind. You could hear distant conversations. You can feel the light breeze of the beach, but then also the kind of waves of sunlight and heat coming down. Right, and then going walking down to the ocean and getting into the water, and the water being cold at first, and then the sensation, experience of coldness, and then the vastness of, look out towards the sea, and, to just look out and experience that vastness, and then the buoyancy, like floating and, being in the water. So then there's driving back from the beach, and then there's traffic, the experience of traffic and the mind, in, traffic. So there's nothing off limits. So the supreme conduct is training in the entire meaning of meditation. So this is, there again, there's nothing off limits in terms of, like, you can't say your practice session just ends right here, or there, right? Everywhere we go, everything we experience, waking, dreaming, mundane, totally mundane stuff, like I'm not the most mindful walker around the house, and for some reason I'm always like stubbing my pinky toe, and I stubbed it very badly the other day, and it's all like black and blue and messed up. But what I tried to focus on was like the immediacy of the shooting pain, the immediacy of my reaction, and then like how quickly those things both dissipate as well. So again, even stubbing your toe and finding ourselves in the experience of pain or the frustration of, like, who put that there, kind of thing, becomes a ground for practice. This is the joys of being a householder. So Jared asks, can one conceive of Mahamudra shamatha as a more spacious, zoomed out view of mind and the present phenomena, and the Vipassana aspect is zooming in on the phenomenon that arises? So this is a good question. So within the context, so Mahamudra is, the practice of shamatha and Vipassana, right? And in Tibetan, it's Shine and Lakton. Now, the shamatha in Mahamudra is more spacious than just kind of like more single-minded or single, I guess you could say like single-minded or single-pointed concentration exercises where one might use, for example, a candle flame, and you just kind of like focus, like a laser on that, right? So the shamatha piece is to focus. And just as you say, Jared, it's to kind of understand. So the focus piece is one thing, right? Like if we're going to focus on one thing, like there's a bookshelf in front of me, so I can focus on one of the letters in one of the words. Now the thing is like that focus is great, right? It serves some purpose. But then there's the entirety of the experience that's arising in the moment. Right? And so that's where, just as you say, we kind of learn to kind of stretch out our awareness. So like we're by focused in a sense. We're focused single-pointedly on ultimately, like, what we should be looking at, and I don't like using the word should, is just focus on everything that's arising in the moment. So as if we try and do that, like just try and do that for a second. Like take some moment, sit. So Mahamudra shamatha is really, there's one form where rather than, using something visual to focus, we use phenomena, right? So the experience of whatever is arising. So, and sometimes it's called, using mind as an anchor. And so you let everything that arises be the anchor of mind. So there's training in this, in gaining familiarity with being able to, be totally present with everything that's happening in the moment. Sound, touch, taste, mental activity, and just letting everything happen. That's kind of like the most expansive, form of shamatha within the Mahamudra tradition. So, it's not inaccurate to say it's kind of zoomed out, right? So everything that arises is just arising, and we're noticing it, and we're aware. We don't have to dart around, right? Part of this also is learning the confidence around what awareness is. So in the beginning, like, we'll think that we need to zoom in on one thing, right? But really, our awareness isn't 1,000 points of light outward, ding, 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 ding. Our awareness is just naturally expansive. We can be aware of something behind us, sound behind us. We can be aware of sensation behind us. And at the same time, we can be aware of the whole visual field in front of us. We can be aware of what's arising within us. We can be aware of, sounds that might be coming from outside the room that we're in, or even outside of our abode, or wherever it is that we are. And so then the Vipassana piece is zooming in not on the phenomena that arises, but on the nature of the awareness, on the nature of the ground. So, so just as, this point is, the confidence of the view cuts through doubts about the basis, and the essential point of meditation is to remain undistracted in that. What we're looking to do is, with the Vipassana piece, is to allow us to expand awareness towards mind experience itself. Right? So how big is the mind? And just kind of feeling into that experience. Feeling into, does awareness stop within the confines of these walls? Like outside, is there no awareness? Okay. If there is, how far out does it go? Is there awareness within the body? Is mind there? Where is mind? So it's not just only experience. It's the ground itself. It's that which everything arises out of. Does that make sense? And so Jersey writes, I have a question about using Tilopa's 6 nails in my shamatha practice. When I start my session, I mentally recite the 6 nails one at a time with each breath, so as to set my intention for the session. And as I sit, I just notice whether I either recall, imagine, think, or experience, or try to control, and just try to notice it, to let it go and to relax into my present experience. Is this a reasonable way of applying this? Yes, yeah. So this is a good question, and thank you, Jersey. The kind of the real art, and all of us kind of need to figure this out individually to some extent, is how to use these instructions without solidifying them and turning them into kind of slogans that we just kind of like paste over everything that happens. And so that's not a bad way to go about it. So you just want to let Tilopa's 6 nails inform you stylistically, maybe you could say. So the same way you might say, well, that they're basically kind of instructions for the directionality of practice. And in the beginning, because we can be new to this, it helps to recite them. And then after a while, just, gaining confidence in the fact that, the awareness aspect of this experience is the thing that allows us to understand whether or not we are, obsessed with the past, or preoccupied with the future, like what's coming next, or preoccupied with controlling, or examining or thinking. So what will happen naturally is eventually the experience of confidence arises within our relationship to awareness that allows us to kind of hold both, right? So we are aware of Tilopa's 6 nails, and we're aware of how things might be arising within that, but almost like a not in an obsessive way, not in a conceptual way, I guess you could say. So I mean, I think your way of applying this is good. Over time it will become more innate, I guess you could say. And then Sam writes, perhaps slightly related, I notice I have a fleeting experience of spaciousness, but often there is a feeling that I'm on the edge of something perhaps wider or more expansive. What I notice is that it is always exactly at this moment. My mind sort of rebels and pulls back. It's almost like a fear of deep water or vertigo feeling. Is this to do with a feeling of confidence the text talks about? Yes, yeah. So I mean, kind of breaking through that habit is really where we can develop more confidence, in this particular situation. There are. I really like the use of when you say it's almost like a fear of deep water. So it's funny how we will find ourselves rebelling when our practice gets deep, and I think that this is a really this is very connected to an aspect of our minds that just wants everything to be easily contained, right, intellectually knowable, directly controlled by me, kind of thing. And when we get to these places where things just kind of another good kind of metaphor, it's like kind of like the knots are being untied. For some reason, there's part of us that just like holds on. And it's like, we'll look for the distraction. It's like, oh, I'm thirsty. I need to get up and get a glass of water. There's no water here. Oh, I thought I heard somebody at the door. Like it's amazing the extent to which we will kind of like look for distractions. My suggestion is to simply just try and allow yourself to wait to see what comes next. So when these things arise, when especially when we feel compelled to kind of quote unquote break the meditation practice, we are really benefit from just trying to stay a little bit longer and to keep going. And again, we might hit a wall, and again, the session could end, we can pick it up, and the next time we find ourselves having that experience, to see if we can sit a little bit longer with whatever's arising. If we never did that, if we never tried to wait a little bit more and see what's happening, and to see how the whether the process matures, what comes next, then we're never going to develop that full confidence that Karmapa is talking about in this particular case. And so the confidence is really going back to the metaphor of like our partner's body or something like that, or our own body, right? The confidence is born by repeatedly kind of coming back to body, right? Knowing the way our scalp feels, right? Knowing the way our ears feel, our jawline, our neck, our chest, our back, our legs. our feet, And we know this to such an extent sometimes that, like, we might find, we have a mosquito bite or something, and it just like stands out because we're so highly attuned to our body. So in a very similar way, like, the confidence really is that kind of coming back to meditation, coming back to the fact, and just very gently with our awareness, recognizing that, oh, this is the experience of myself pushing back. Just noticing. That's it. We don't need to turn it into a big thing. Push back, continue to practice. We can push back really hard, and all of a sudden the practice goes from very, expansive, increasingly expansive, to just like almost agonizing for whatever reason, because we're reacting. Just to sit with the reaction and to just try and go a little bit further each time, and that's how we, develop this kind of confidence. So Lorena asks about if I could say more about Vipassana. So the Vipassana in Mahamudra is different than we find in the insight tradition, in that what we're like in the insight tradition, there's and there's nothing wrong with the insight tradition. There's also a lot of labeling, right? And so what we're trying not to do is we're not trying to label anything, right? We're just, working with remaining aware of everything that's happening in the moment. But then also becoming, the other quote unquote object, and these are not good words at all. There are very few very good words, but the quote unquote object of our inquiry, expansive, self-knowing inquiry, is the nature of mind itself. Right? So rather than, it just being, for example, body-centered, right, where it's like, there's a ceiling fan on here, right, so I can feel the wind, on my body. Last weekend, I was out somewhere in nature, and I got all these like bites. They're still itchy, right? So sitting here, I feel the wind. I still kind of feel the residual itchiness of the bites I received. I've been outside in the sun, so my body feels relaxed and a little tired. Like a nap would be nice later today. Right, so that's all body-centered, right? Now, with the Vipassana, like, the Vajrayana or Vajra Yoga Vipassana, or, Mahamudra Vipassana, what we try and do is turn that awareness. So there's this phrase sometimes that's used, it's described like an eye looking at itself. So mind knowing mind. So, this field of experience arises from the experience of mind. What is the origin of mind? Does it have an origin? Again, what shape? Does the mind have a shape? Does it have a color? Is there anything outside of the mind? What is the relationship between the mind and time? Does the mind exist within time? Or does time exist within mind? And, so what we don't do, though, is ask the question and like wait for it. It's not like like a game show. so it's very much too. I think it was Jersey's point about, unless I'm getting this wrong, the attribution, but about working with Tilopa's 6 nails. It's learning how to hold all of the information, in Tilopa's 6 nails, and to just apply directly to meditation experience. And so I just want to get to Lorena's second questions on this. Does that mean focusing on thoughts? Does that observation of mind come naturally from staying connected with open sky awareness? Yes. So thoughts can be part of it, right? Because thoughts arise within the context of the experience of mind. Right? Now one piece of the Vipassana kind of part of this is, from where do thoughts arise? Is there like a I'm just like, but is there like a birth canal for thoughts? Where do thoughts, like when a thought begins to kind of like trickle off, right? We're not reactive and we're not reacting to it. Does it just kind of like, does it stop automatically? Or does it, does the thought just kind of taper off? What is the space between thoughts like? What is there? Like, this is where it gets like the confident, the building of confidence in the practice is through this repeated coming back and coming back and coming back. Same way we come back to, when we close our eyes and just feel our arm and our hand and beneath our fingers and feel our fingernails. Right? In order to really know like our hand and our arm and have full confidence in that, we need to take time to feel everything, right? We like feel our faces, to feel every part, even the parts like the bags under our eyes, getting fat in the cheeks, like all of that stuff, the neck, and feeling, so in order to know our bodies to some extent, we have to be able to interact with it. And it's the same thing with the mind. In order to have that deep, definitive knowledge, we come back and we come back and we come back. We come back on the cushion, we come back off the cushion. We come back when we're so activated, somebody says something and we just like, go to 10. That's a great place to practice meditation. And we don't need to sit down. We just bring awareness to what's arising. Well, so then Lorena asks, do you mean following the stream of thoughts or what's happening? I find it helpful to follow being with all of what's happening, like outlining and savoring each edge, each thing. Yes, yeah. So, we don't necessarily want to chase the train of thoughts, because that very easily kind of leads us back into this kind of, almost like addictive, analysis, right? This is like kind of like straight observational experience, except, the thing we're observing with is not our eyes, right? The thing we're observing with is our mind and our awareness of itself. So that practice of just coming back and coming back, and it's almost like it's a form of testing. How is it now? How is it now? How is it now? How is it now? Is it there? Is it there? Is it there? Just understanding. Because sometimes the mind is depending on our experience, if we were to only judge it by what's happening right now, that's not necessarily going to be the most full experience. And again, there's a text, I don't have it here, but by the ninth Karmapa, who points out, that the thing about us as people is, we can read books about Mahamudra and then very easily in the practice begin to kind of insert all the right language. Oh, everything is arising in a way that's luminous, and even though we're not having that experience. And so, as the antidote to like an intellectual kind of meditation where we're kind of lying to ourselves. I'm not saying anyone here is doing that, but as an antidote to that, we kind of come back and come back and come back. And, as you say, Lorena, like with light, like with a feather's touch, just observe. All it is observing. Like imagine if we were all at a zoo and all of the animals just walked like a parade out the door, right? But they came close to you. And so you could see all of the different textures of their fur, all of the different patterns, their feathers, their scales, are they bumpy, are they soft? And all it is just observing. And through that experience, we get to have definitive, much more definitive experience of what a rhinoceros really looks like, If we can touch it, it's even better, right? With our eyes closed, the difference between a cheetah's fur and a bear's fur. So Anjana writes, can you say a little about how to keep the sense of wonderment and freshness along with that beautiful innate familiarity? Also related to this is the way we might feel like, oh, I keep repeating this pattern of behavior, but maybe it isn't really a repetition. How can we experience this sense of stuckness or weariness differently? Don't know if this makes a whole lot of sense. No, it does make sense. So I think well, a couple things. I mean, Ninth Karmapa says that our practice sessions should be short and repeated. And so the benefit of that is it's not like we get into this long meditation session and then, we're like just like tired out of our minds and getting frustrated and, what is this Mahamudra stuff? And it's so hard and I'm tired and, blah, 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 blah. And, we just get kind of, it sucks. So, the beauty of these shorter sessions is that these shorter sessions allow us the ability to kind of come right in, experience, and just have that experience. Not worry about it being too long. So have a 12-minute meditation session, 15-minute meditation session, or 10 minutes, or even 5 minutes. The thing about our mind is it's with us everywhere. We're part of it. It's part of us, so you can't get a break from having the ground of meditation always being present, right? Sitting down on a couch, experience of mind. Getting up to go to the grocery store, experience of mind. Doing the laundry, experience of mind. Everything. Now, I think the other piece is what allows us to have, or what allows me at least, like to have a sense of intimacy with this, is keeping it lighthearted. Sometimes people practice meditation like they're trying to like compress a piece of coal into a diamond. They're just like tight, and that doesn't work. Doesn't work well, at least. We can't be tight, and we have to have a sense of humor because imagine like I think they're at one point my root teacher Anizomo was talking about just the amazing nature of like samsara. And one of the most amazing kind of qualities of that is that each one of us at one time or another committed the most heinous, terrible acts towards other beings, right? Like things that just are just absolutely horrid, right? And and yet, through the process or whatever process that led us to this moment, like we're here. And we don't need to take everything we do so seriously. It's important to remember like the entire range, and that sometimes we're a fuck up, and sometimes we're incredible and exactly what we need to be. Sometimes what arises is just like, like for example, I had a bone spur on my pinky once, like right at the base. And basically I noticed it just from the same, thing of just like noticing my body, right? It's my body and I'm touching it all the time. And I noticed that thing and I was like, oh, like, and it just caused me to be concerned. Oh, I wonder what this is. And over time I discovered it was a bone spur, and then it was temporary, and it went away. Same way, almost with the same speed in which it just arose. And all things that arise in our meditation experience are temporary. So we could find ourselves in the midst of one of the most painful kind of recognitions of some of our worst qualities. And that's okay. It helps us to understand the entire range of what we have done, not only in this life, but all lifetimes. It helps us to have a sense of humor. It helps us to not take ourselves so seriously. But it especially also helps us to, again, understand that even though the most grossest, nastiest thoughts might arise, so as an object of quote unquote object of vipassana, is, do those thoughts color the mind? And that's a question everyone should sit with. When we take things like innate Buddha nature into consideration, then they're really, the root of the mind is constantly pure, right? And there's something that happens in relationship to attachment, aversion, and ignorance, in relationship to thoughts arising, senses experiencing things, etc. And so developing a greater confidence in the nature of the mind and the nature of our kind of primordial purity to begin with is an important piece of learning how to kind of come back to joy, and the recognition of even the little blockages that we might experience, or how we experience them will change over time, and eventually with more practice it dissipate. So like the Vajra quality of mind is so expansive and so like it's immutable, right? And so because it's immutable and because it's expansive, by having confidence in that, then a lot of our kind of preoccupations with the kind of things that arise out of that will naturally dissipate, and even the rate in which thought activity arises will begin to kind of slow down to some extent. So this kind kind of question and where we're at. So there's another stanza, in the song. The self-appearances that have never existed are mistaken as objects. Through the power of ignorance, self-knowing is mistaken for a self. Through the power of dualism, we wander in the vastness of existence. May the error of ignorance be thoroughly understood. It's a self-appearances that have never existed are mistaken as objects. Right? So just kind of coming back in total honesty with ourselves. Right? There's no, we're not sitting in front of an audience. We're not worrying about being judged, and we're also not judging ourselves. Self-appearances that have never existed are mistaken as objects. So, that which arises in our meditation experience, that which arises from, in our mind at any given time, is very easily mistaken for an object. And I don't mean like a physical object, like a phone or a book or something like that, but the reality of our thoughts, the reality of our thought train. And sometimes it can be so compelling. I mean, literally, like, thought activity can be so compelling, we will get up and do something and create something, right? So through the power of ignorance, self-knowing is mistaken for a self. Again, self-knowing. I am seeing, I am experiencing, I am recognizing, right? If we cut the I stuff out and do things like practicing chill and whatnot, we can kind of like work on, on one level, like, towards this kind of different way of cutting out the middleman, cutting out the I, the self. We can kind of come right back to recognizing how how just the awareness of things, through the lens of ignorance, makes it seem as if I am the person who is experiencing everything. And that's not what we're, we're trying to cut through that. And through the power of dualism, we wander in the vastness of existence. And so this dualism is, again, like coming back to like, oh shit, man, like now I'm pushing back again in my meditation practice, or, I've hit a block, or, oh man, this feels dull. It's the labeling, judgy, experience that we want to be able to, be free from. Being free from the dualism. So may the error of ignorance be purified and thoroughly understood. So Nicole writes, I'm wondering about those that have trauma that's been embodied that might seek to escape that feeling through disconnecting from it. It seems like it might be easy to bypass that feeling of discomfort by trying to go into the mind rather than into the body. How can you discern disassociation from a genuine experience of the clear, light nature of the mind? So this is a really good question. So again, like before I go like further into this question, I want to first say that we also need to be careful about Dharma being regarded as kind of the remedy for all things, right? And so when we have experienced trauma, and especially trauma that's embodied, right? It's best to seek, the necessary support that exists, outside, quote unquote, outside of the Dharma world, right? So through, different kind of therapeutic models and support like that. And why is that important? It's important actually because especially this point about bypassing. It's what I would prefer. We all can keep our eyes open to is the way that we might bypass. And should there be a particular trauma that arises, we need to be able to properly deal with that. So Dharma is not literal medicine. Now, it can help us reduce some of the over attachment that arises in relationship to even embodied experience, because again, we're still looking at the self, right? A self who has been harmed, right? A self who is still caught in a cycle of harm, because the trauma is located in the body. When I was training as a chaplain, I led a meditation group on a psych floor, and so I was in this room with a variety of people, and I was doing basically just kind of like a body scan meditation, and so we're just kind of like going through the body, trying to release stress and anxiety, all the different parts of the body. And as we're going through, when we were at this point of the arms, and I was like kind of bringing this camera to bring this light down along their forearms, and there was a participant who stopped, and I'd given everybody permission to let me know if they need to stop, and if you need to leave the room, that's okay. If you want to stop the session, just please feel free to do so. And so it turned out that this person had, in the past, been assaulted, and somebody had grabbed them by the arm there, and the entire memory experience just kind of was it was like completely reborn to her in that moment. And we had time on a individual basis to kind of process it and make sure that she was felt like she had the proper resourcing to be able to continue to heal from that. Now, like in other cases, like I've done breath-related kind of hatha yoga-like work with people. Also, they happen to be on the psych floor, and I discovered that sometimes people with different kinds of mental health diagnoses become very triggered by breathing exercises. And this, of course, isn't only psych patients. This happens to a fairly decent number of people, especially in the beginning of doing something like that when they're not used to it. So I'm bringing all this up because it's important for us to recognize that sometimes our practice needs to be modulated when experiences like this are recognized, when they occur. Because it means that when we continue to go into the practice, given the fact that we recognize that these traumas are there, we need to be okay to change the entire process up to be able to account for the trauma and to give the proper focus to healing. So I feel very kind of uncomfortable saying that we should do things like, focus on the intensity of the experience that's arising from being triggered right back into a traumatic experience, and recognize that that is inherently empty. Like that doesn't seem useful to me, right? Um, so I think that what is of the utmost importance is that these things can be addressed, and sometimes they need to be addressed, outside of the Dharma framework, and be more properly addressed, uh, by the disciplines that are more appropriate for that. Because I can also say, like, I've done some kind of like emergency intervention work with people coming out of Vajrayana communities who were either witness to trauma or uh, caused to experience trauma, and then also simultaneously had the Dharma kind of thrown at them as a tool to just get over it. So we need to be careful. And I think that part of this is like, it requires us to have a certain like confidence in the importance of blending in self-care, but also like a loving quality towards ourselves as we move into our Dharma practice. So like, I'll share this with everybody. Like, so this whole like coronavirus outbreak, I'm working on like another book, and I'm meeting with the publisher next week, and I promised him, a certain number of pages just as a draft, for him to get his mind around, what is coming next. And a certain amount of it focuses on some of my work in relationship to the coronavirus outbreak here in New York City when it was very bad, in the spring. And then the subsequent work of blessing the bodies of people who have died and are being buried in the public cemetery here. And in writing, these pages, like, I just found all of this unresolved trauma and probably PTSD to some extent, right, connected to that, just like well up. Like I, started crying. It's just all there, right? And so what I found myself doing is just stopping and taking time for myself, and like honoring like what was arising, right? And definitely not seeking to transform it into some kind of Dharma thing, but just acknowledging this and acknowledging, the additional work I need to do with respect to myself and my own healing around this, the way that I've been impacted, by all of this. And so I want to be careful to say, like, oh, Dharma isn't all that, because it is all that. But it's not, the panacea for all things, and I don't think anybody really technically needs to feel less than. There's no reason to feel less than if we need, um, other forms of support. So I just want to kind of catch up to some of these comments. So Sai writes, thanks for that. I work in physical therapy, focused on motor vehicle accidents and other ways healthy people can become highly sensitized to somatic awareness or breath awareness. Learned early on that cookie cutter approaches can cause harm, and each individual has to be approached in a fresh and unique way. Yes, I agree 100%. And I would hope that we could also keep in mind that applies to us too, so that when we're engaging in, whether it's Mahamudra or visualization practices or other things. Oh yeah, no, and I don't I don't think you're well, okay, well, I didn't get to Tony's point yet, but we just need to be able to take into account our own experience up till now, and the whole layer of the cake, so to speak, all the different layers of the cake of me or you, and that includes all of the difficult stuff, our traumas, our um, uh, the bad habits we're growing out of, every possible thing. And again, just because something is written in a text, I think this is really important. Just because something is written in a text, including sadhanas, it's not a prescription. That sadhanas should really be seen as guidelines, right? Just because they're written on paper does not mean they're etched into the consciousness of your being, right? They are a means of communicating an experience of realization from somebody who has experienced that realization. But then how each one of us ends up experiencing that, and that kind of transfer, like, dynamic that arises between practice of a sadhana, practice of a text, practice of a meditation instruction, needs to be kind of born through our experience, through what we hear, how we arise, what's present, and all of that. And so this requires of us a sense of depth and maturity in relationship to what Dharma practice is. And really good embodied Dharma practice is practice that's rooted within the particularities of our, the ground that we're arising out of as individuals in the moment. Tony writes, whether or not it's voluntary, for me at least, has come up in ways that, quote, disguise themselves as voluntary. Like deep samadhi practices can be very similar to disassociative experiences I've had, and it takes care and grounding to navigate that territory. Yeah, I think that I mean that's a good point. And again, this kind of comes back to this work of cultivating definitive experience, and we can only cultivate definitive experience by moving around in our practice. Returning back. And so even, with traumas, we can return back, not to be re-traumatized, but just to the edge of where, we feel we need to kind of put everything down. And just return back and sit in observation. Come back, return back, sit in observation. And there can be a healing component to returning back, almost as if we're witnessing, where the trauma arises from and what it's connected to. But we have to go really gently, and really, mindful of the fact that we're not, we need to be really practical about our practice as well. And so just as much as like that practicality means that we have to recognize that there is liberation as a possibility within this lifetime, we also need to recognize that for that liberation to arise genuinely, we need to demonstrate the same amount of care and compassion towards ourselves in our practice that we would want to do for other people. So this is, a tricky topic, but the thing that is the ultimate antidote to the trickiness is learning how to step into doing this practice and all practices in a really authentic, embodied way. Yeah, I don't experience anyone here as arguing, which is a beautiful thing. Um, and then Jersey writes, in this context, I also find it helpful to remember that Buddhist psychology, as advanced as it is 2,500 years old. The science of trauma is much more recent. That's true. And the human experience, though, is even older. And so, like, you know, the trauma experienced by humans is as old as there are humans. So I think people need to do what's right for them. And some people might, you know, feel the need to kind of go real traditionally Buddhist about it. And if that is what they want to do, and they're consenting to that, then that's okay. Others, you know, will have a more blended approach, and that's okay as well. You know, I think the most important piece is that we're all working towards a desire to greater realization within the context of, you know, our respective capacities in the moment. And this, you know, respective capacity piece has nothing to do with, you know, the blending of different disciplines in with Dharma practices less than anything else. I have to remember that, like, you know, there's a skillful means component in all of this. And so sometimes there is a tremendous value in, I mean, there's obviously tremendous value, I think, in being able to address, you know, the psychological, you know, emotional components of trauma. And then the physical aspect of that as well, even though it's not written about in sutras or tantras necessarily, doesn't make that invalid, you know. And you know, I mean, Lorena, I really value this point as well. Like, you know, I'm so grateful this is being discussed. I suffer from the impacts of trauma daily, and meditation is very helpful. I'm looking into trauma therapists, and I'm hoping to find support with how it lives in my body. And I have been worrying that engaging in mental health work might in some way further cement me in the storylines. I've wondered if meditation is enough. Maybe if I went on long-term retreats help me excavate the pain, and I wonder if enough practice can eventually wash it all away. This is, you know, I love this. I mean, there could be like a book written about this particular topic. It doesn't need to be either or, you know, and I think that this is, you know, again, goes back to this piece where each one of us on an individual basis will need to and ought to take time to understand that which is traumatic for us, as well as that which needs to be implemented so that we can heal. And again, you know, thankfully, we don't live in, you know, medieval Tibet, right? We don't need to kind of, you know, go back in time. We can make use of a lot of the you know, means that are available to us, you know, at this time. And you know, we also need to look at, you know, the way that some, you know, Western kind of responses can perhaps at times solidify storylines, right? And so I think what it might be the best way of looking at this is that just like in you know, the practice of Mahamudra, like here, I think this is, I love this, and I don't know if this is a cheap shot, but it cannot be indicated by saying it is this. It cannot be refuted by saying it is not this. The true nature that transcends the intellect is non-composite. May there be certainty in the extreme of the true meaning. So just as the mind cannot be indicated as being this and not this, and that the essential nature of the mind transcends the intellect and is non-composite. Like, the beautiful thing about that is it kind of means that, like, we have everything open for our experiential and experimental practice of coming back and back and back to the nature of mind. Right? So we need, if we need healing from trauma in the moment, then we should attend to that. And we should continue our practice. And we should look at where there's cognitive dissonance within us, on an individual level and perhaps also a group level. And we should sit with that. And we should take care of ourselves. And we should sit with that. And we should engage in the appropriate treatments for whatever it is we need to go through, to heal. And we should sit with that. There's nowhere in any texts on Mahamudra does it say it is just this, it can only be accomplished this one way. And, I also kind of, acknowledge that sometimes, as creatures of habit, as humans, like, sometimes we will want the authentic way. And so we'll think, everything in modern psychology or, trauma therapy or, all of this stuff didn't exist in Tibet, 50 years ago, let alone, 200 years ago. So I'm not going to rely on that. In fact, I've got this really, and I know, like, we're kind of going over time a little bit, but, a long time ago, I was traveling in India with a friend, a very close friend, and we were walking into a restaurant, and this European guy came up to us, and he had no money, and he was like, he said, "I have no money. Would you please, like, help me get some food?" And we were like, "Why don't you come sit with us and we'll get your dinner?" And so we sat and we were talking, and it turned out that this person wanted to become a monk, and and you find people like this coming to India to do all that kind of stuff all the time, and so we were speaking with him, and then it was kind of clear that he was being very extreme in his way of thinking, and he was demonstrating this by saying, like, well, if I'm going to be a monk, then I should never, like, sleep in under a roof, and we're like, well, okay, that's not necessarily true. Monasteries have roofs, etc. But he was like, no, if I'm really going to do it, I won't sleep under a roof. And then we're like, okay. And then this person was like, wanted to know where we were going to be traveling from. This was all happening in New Delhi. And we told him, and he said, oh, I would like to come visit you. And we're like, okay, that's fine. We'll give you our address and the phone number where we could be reached there. And he said that would be great, but I can't use paper because in Tibet, paper used to be very rare. It was like totally true. And we were just like, this is so weird, and he had developed this, like, weird fixation on, like, trying to live like it was 19th century Tibet. And it just was out of sync. And we similarly need to learn how to be in sync, not only within relationship to any given tradition, but then also what is needed for us in the moment. Like, I don't know where that person is right now, but I hope that he was able to eventually use paper and, sleep under a roof and all of these things. We too need to be able to develop a relationship to skillful means, to be able to address our own liberation which includes the cessation of our own suffering, which includes various forms of healing, which of course includes healing modalities. And I want everyone to feel empowered to be able to go about that in your own way. So in any event, we're over time. I want to thank you all for these wonderful questions and for your practice, and we'll keep going. So take good care.